The Sinister Secrets of Merryworth Toy Factory. It was my first day at the Merryworth Toy Factory, the leading company in crafting high-quality, handmade dolls. They were prized by collectors and children alike, so when I got the job offer, I couldn't say no. The money was good, and I needed a fresh start after my last job had ended on a sour note. If only I knew what I was getting myself into. The factory had an odd, almost otherworldly aura to it. On the outside, it looked like any other factory, but inside, the dimly lit rooms were filled with an eerie silence. The workers kept to themselves, their eyes downcast and their expressions somber. The only sounds to be heard were the click-clack of needles, the snip-snip of scissors, and the occasional creak of a chair. My supervisor, Mrs. Wilkins, was an older woman with an unsettling smile that never seemed to reach her eyes. She showed me to my workstation, a small table with various tools and materials. "These are the basics," she said, gesturing to the assortment of needles, thread, fabric, and other items. "You'll learn more as you go along. Just remember, the dolls must be perfect, or they won't be accepted." As I settled in, I noticed that the other workers had photographs pinned to their workstations, images of young children with their names, ages, and dates of disappearance written underneath. I asked Mrs. Wilkins about it, and she explained that they were missing children from around the world, and we made dolls in their likeness to help raise awareness and funds for their families. It was a bittersweet task, but I took pride in being part of something so meaningful. Weeks went by, and I grew more skilled at my job. The dolls were eerily lifelike, their glass eyes gleaming in the dim light. I found myself lost in their intricacies, crafting the perfect button noses, stitching the delicate lips. But despite my dedication, there was a growing unease in the pit of my stomach. One evening, after everyone had left for the day, I decided to explore the factory. I felt a magnetic pull towards the lower levels, an irresistible curiosity that led me down a dark, narrow staircase. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around me, but I couldn't turn back. At the bottom of the stairs, I discovered a locked door with a tiny, dirty window. I wiped away the grime and peered inside. To my horror, I saw rows and rows of small cages, each one containing a terrified child. Their eyes were wide with fear, their bodies covered in bruises and cuts. I could see tufts of their hair missing, patches of skin raw and red. My heart raced as I fumbled with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation clawed at me, and I knew I had to find a way to save those children. I raced back upstairs, searching for any clues or keys that might help me. That's when I stumbled upon the factory's darkest secret. In a hidden room, I found meticulous records of each child, their abduction, the donations of their hair and skin, and the meticulous process of crafting the dolls in their image. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The dolls were made from the very children they were meant to represent. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All I knew was that I needed to expose this horrifying secret and save those innocent lives. As I rifled through the documents, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the pitter-patter of tiny feet. I turned to see the dolls, the ones we'd been so painstakingly crafting, coming to life. Their glass eyes swiveled to stare at me, their tiny mouths opening and closing in silent, unnatural movements. They surrounded me, their intentions clear. They were protecting their twisted origins, and they would stop at nothing to preserve the factory's secret. Panicking, I stumbled back and tried to escape, but the dolls were relentless. They clawed at my ankles, tripping me and dragging me down to the floor. I fought back, desperately trying to fend them off, but they were surprisingly strong, their tiny hands like vice grips on my limbs. As I lay there, struggling against their unyielding grasp, Mrs. Wilkins appeared in the doorway. Her unsettling smile was wider than ever, a malicious glint in her eyes. "You should have stayed out of it, my dear," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "Now, you'll become a part of our collection." I knew I had to act fast. With a surge of adrenaline, I kicked one of the dolls away and scrambled to my feet. I sprinted towards the door, the dolls nipping at my heels like a pack of ravenous wolves. my heart hammered in my chest as I dashed through the factory, desperate to escape. I finally made it outside, the cold night air burning my lungs as I ran for my life. I could hear the dolls following me, their tiny feet thudding against the pavement, but I refused to look back. I knew that if I did, I would be lost forever. I ran to the nearest police station, my words tumbling out in a frantic, disjointed mess. At first, they didn't believe me. Who could blame them? But when they went to investigate the factory, they found the hidden room, the records, and the children trapped in their cages. The Maryworth toy factory was shut down, and the people responsible for the atrocities were arrested. The children were reunited with their families, and the nightmare seemed to come to an end. But for me, the terror would never truly be over. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still see the dolls, their glassy stares, their twisted smiles. I can hear the pitter-patter of their tiny feet, following me into the darkness. And I know that, for as long as I live, I will never forget the horrors of the Maryworth toy factory. I'm a security guard who works the night shift at an art gallery, but I don't protect the paintings. I want the job, I said. It was 2 years ago, but I can vividly recall every aspect of that interview. The innocence of those 4 words. The stillness of the gallery. My befuddled reaction to Amy Andrews, the gallery owner whose questions unsettled me. Her composure never waned. "Are you a spiritual man, Mr. Hull?" Miss Andrews asked. "Yes," I answered. "Are we talking about the art?" I can't say I'll be able to give philosophical or religious insights. "Don't worry," Miss Andrews replied, smiling. "I'm not trying to trip you up. In a way, my question does relate to the paintings, but perhaps not in the way you might expect. I just want you to know that I was a police officer for many years before working as a security guard at the embassy," I said. "I have plenty of references." The gallery owner raised a hand, smiling politely. "I've seen your CV. I promise that you don't have to fight your corner, Mr. Hull. I know you're physically capable, but this job takes a toll on a mental level." I nodded my head, ignorantly believing that I understood her. "I know. I worked many solo night shifts at the embassy, but I can handle it." "That's not what I mean," she replied. "Do you know why my gallery exhibits a permanent display of my sister's artwork?" "To honor her memory," I said. "I saw that news clip a couple of years ago about her admittance to the local psychiatric ward." "Harper Andrews, right?" "I'm sorry. That must have been tough on your family." "Not as tough as Harper found it," Miss Andrews replied. "Her artwork tells the story of her decline into sickness, not sickness of the mind, but sickness of the soul. She faced something and captured it in these paintings to protect humanity." Hearing her speak, I thought Amy seemed just as unwell as her sister, but I would soon learn that it was no delusion. Every night on the job is terrifying, but none so much as the first. And I'll never forget Miss Andrews' parting words as she walked out of the door. "At night, the paintings must be closely guarded. Left unobserved for too long, they can. Well, just make sure you keep watch." "What is this? Night at the museum?" I mused. No. Far worse than fiction. The first hour of my shift was blissfully mundane. Basking in the blue glow of the gallery's security lighting, a perturbing painting eyeballed me from the far wall. It depicted a lanky, pencil-thin man with frightfully long legs and a pair of white eyes which seemed to follow me around the room, as all freakish eyes in paintings do. As I strolled around the gallery, following Miss Andrews' strict rule of regularly observing the paintings, I took a closer look at the white-eyed man. I shivered at his janky jaw, which hung abnormally loosely. He wore jet-black trousers, but his monstrous, bony torso was shirtless, and he was the farthest a man could be from looking human. I stopped to read the plaque beneath the painting of the haunting figure. The exactor. The one who exacts torture. He longs to break free. He will devour mankind. I hurried past the painting, reasonably certain that nobody would ever dream of stealing artwork so horrifying, no need to guard it too closely. But the gallery didn't exactly become more joyous as I continued my round. They were petrifying. I should have given the paintings more than a cursory glance before applying for the job position. Another painting portrayed a young girl, no more than 10 years of age, who wore a bright red pinafore, plaited brunette hair, and a blank face. Not figuratively. Blank. In place of eyes, a nose, and a mouth, there was only skin. Taut flesh, painted with smooth brushstrokes that made Harper's intentions abundantly clear. The artist had not accidentally smudged the face. She had purposefully neglected to give the little girl any features. Harper's Youth dies. As we age, we slowly come to life. We sin. They know that. They know everything. There were countless paintings of dreadful scenes too. Cities in ruin. The end of the world. Endless infernos of melting flesh, and they were the lucky ones who were offered a swift mercy. The survivors in the apocalyptic paintings were tortured in gory, gruesome ways by dreadful, inhuman men like the one in the first painting. I usually have a strong stomach, but something about those paintings filled me with unbearable dread. The apocalyptic art seemed so visceral. As I viewed it, I was certain I heard the screams of the last humans on Earth. Felt the heat of the flames on my skin. Saw the exactors move. And then there was a painting of the art gallery. The plaque read, "Prison." They entered our world, so I locked them here. Feeling suitably terrified, I scurried to the sofa by the gallery's entrance and plopped myself down. I work a day job, and the night shift is just my way of making ends meet. The exhaustion of that jam-packed day finally hit me. It was only when I sat down on the sofa that fatigue walloped me like a wall. My eyelids closed. An hour later, a thrumming sound startled me awake. I twisted my head to see a notification on my phone, chuckling in relief. I opened the message from Kara, my wife, welcoming the distraction from my isolated, soundless night shift. But it was an odd message. "I was telling my mom about your new job, and she said you should look for another one." Apparently, there are always adverts for the night shift on Facebook, and her friend's husband had a mental breakdown after one shift. He won't talk to anyone about what happened. There was another thrumming sound, but it wasn't a vibration from my phone. It was a muffled voice. My head snapped up in time to catch a silhouette vanishing behind one of the gallery walls. I managed to stifle a scream, but I lost my composure and clammed up. I contemplated running out of the gallery, but something stopped me, and it wasn't the prospect of being fired. It was those paintings of Armageddon. I rose to my feet, using the flashlight on my phone to illuminate the dimly lit gallery floor. That muffled sound repeated again, haunting me, a ghostly groan of some emotion I couldn't quite place, but I knew it terrified me. And when I rounded the corner, I found myself facing something utterly inexplicable. The girl from Harper's Youth dies. A young version of Harper, I could only assume. I trembled on the spot as she took clunky steps towards me with frail, near-skeletal legs. She continued to groan, seemingly speaking beneath the flesh that covered her entire face. "I can't understand you," I whispered in horror as the ghastly girl stopped a foot in front of me. I found myself leaning forwards, driven by a force beyond my control, and then the most horrifying thing happened. My cheek twisted to the side, allowing my air to melt through the phantom pool of the girl's face. I screamed silently, terrified to find that I was unable to move my body or utter a sound. Then, with my ear beneath the flesh on Harper's horrendous, featureless face, I could finally hear the words she had been repeating in a muffled, ghoulish voice. "Why did you close your eyes?" The malformed ghost asked in a distorted cry. My body was suddenly hurled to the floor, and the little girl fled into the shadows. My eyes shot to the far wall, and I found that my gut achieved the impossible. It sank to a deeper realm of fear. He was gone. The exactor was a blank canvas. The horrible entity had escaped its painting. Harper's disembodied voice whispered beside my ear, scaring the life out of me. "Find him. He's hiding." I looked up at the ghostly girl's painting. Harper had returned to the canvas, but she was adopting a different pose. Her index finger was pointing at the painting of the art gallery. I yelped in fright, seeing what she had noticed. Behind one of the painted windows on the empty top floor of the building, that inhuman man stood and watched me. Legs shaking, I walked across the gallery to the set of stairs in the back corner. They led to an out-of-bounds floor. Miss Andrews made that abundantly clear. But she also made it clear that I had to keep my eyes on the artwork, and I failed at that. I didn't really have any options. Quivering, I crept up the creaky wooden stairs to a floor that was littered with unhung paintings. The frames were shrouded in white sheets. And at the far end of the room, illuminated only by the moonlight which poured through the murky glass panes, I saw something truly terrifying. The exactor. He stood as tall as the ceiling, and his large form was crouching over an uncovered painting. As I crept closer, I saw what had captivated the terrible creature. It was one of Harper's apocalyptic paintings, depicting a world in flames, and the exactor was melding its shriveled, unclothed arm with the canvas, much as young Harper sank my air through her flesh. However, as I approached the abomination, casting my flashlight upon him, its flesh started to sizzle, and it unleashed a hideous hissing sound. At first I thought the light hurt it, but then I realized it had become aware of the guard's watchful eyes upon it. I finally realized the power of keeping watch. I knew why I was there. "Cast it away," Harper's voice whispered. "How?" I cried. The man spun around, and I screamed at the sight of his wretched wife. The creepy school bus. It all started on a damp, overcast morning. A group of students from Blackwood High School, including myself, found ourselves boarding a dilapidated, old-school bus that we had never seen before. The bus was different from our usual one, its faded yellow paint peeling off in chunks, revealing rusty metal underneath. We didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a temporary replacement. As we settled into the creaky seats, the air inside the bus felt heavy, like a thick fog lingering just out of sight. It didn't take long for the first strange occurrence to happen. One of the girls sitting near the front, Jenny, dropped her pen. When she reached down to pick it up, she shrieked in terror, claiming that something had grabbed her wrist. We all dismissed her outburst as a prank, but soon enough, we all began experiencing our own inexplicable events. Over the next week, the bus's atmosphere grew increasingly unsettling. The air was always colder than it should have been, and the scent of mildew clung to our clothes long after we left the bus. Then, one morning, as we boarded the bus, we found the windows covered in condensation. Amidst the fogged glass, we noticed finger-written messages that read, "Help me," and "Untrapped." This sent chills down our spines, but we tried to laugh it off, thinking it was a prank. The following week, we found out about the story of a former student, Rachel, who had died in a bus accident many years ago. The bus had swerved off the road and into a lake, leaving no survivors. Strangely enough, the descriptions of the bus involved in the accident matched our creepy school bus. The paranormal events intensified after we learned about Rachel. We started hearing whispers in the bus, and one student even claimed they saw Rachel's pale, lifeless face staring at them from outside the window. Eventually, we had enough and reported the bus to the school administration. They dismissed our concerns, but as the weeks went by, more students refused to ride the creepy school bus. It was just me and a few others who continued to endure the eerie atmosphere. We had no other choice, there was no other bus servicing our route. One fateful morning, as the last few of us sat silently in the bus, the engine suddenly died, and the lights flickered out. Panic set in as we heard the sound of water sloshing against the bus, and we realized that the bus was sinking into a lake. As water began seeping in, we heard her voice, clear as day, whispering, "You're trapped, just like me." The voice belonged to none other than Rachel, her spirit still trapped in the bus. We clawed at the windows and doors, desperately trying to escape our watery grave. In the end, we managed to break open the emergency exit, and one by one, we swam to safety. The bus, now fully submerged, disappeared beneath the murky water, taking Rachel's spirit with it. The incident was deemed a freak accident, and no one ever found the creepy school bus again. We vowed to never speak of the terrifying events, but deep down, we knew that we had narrowly escaped the clutches of a vengeful spirit, trapped and tormented in the watery grave of a school bus. There's an old gas station in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. If you ever see it, keep driving. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but I'll be damned if I can come up with a reasonable explanation for the events that transpired during that fateful trip. A group of us, 5 friends, decided to go on a road trip through the forests of the Pacific Northwest during spring break of our senior year. We were all 18 and foolish, filled with a sense of invincibility that comes with youth. Little did we know, our lives would be changed forever by the end of the week. Our journey had been uneventful so far, just the typical banter and laughter that accompanies any group of teenagers on a long drive. It was getting late, and we were deep in the heart of the forest, miles from the nearest town. The dense woods stretched out around us, providing a sense of eerie isolation that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The only light came from the headlights of our old station wagon, slicing through the darkness as we continued onward. It was at that moment when we saw it, an old, decrepit gas station, seemingly abandoned for decades. The faded wooden sign hanging above the entrance had the words "Last Stop" etched into it, barely visible beneath layers of grime and moss. The gas pumps were ancient, rusted relics of a bygone era. Everything about this place screamed, "Keep driving." But in our youthful arrogance, we didn't listen. We decided to pull over and check it out, figuring it would make for a great haunted location to explore. The place had a tangible air of menace, and the darkness seemed to deepen around the gas station as if it was swallowing up the light from our flashlights. We hesitated for a moment before stepping inside the tiny, decrepit building. The door creaked ominously as it opened, revealing a musty, dust-choked interior. The shelves were lined with ancient, unrecognizable products, covered in a thick layer of cobwebs. As we explored the abandoned station, we began to hear strange noises, whispers and distant laughter that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. We tried to brush it off as our imaginations running wild, but the sense of unease grew stronger with each passing minute. It was then that we found the door to the basement. Our bravest friend, Kevin, led the way down the rickety wooden stairs, the rest of us following close behind. The air grew colder as we descended, and the darkness seemed to press in on us from all sides. The basement was a small, cramped space, filled with rotting wooden crates and old, rusted tools. In the corner, we discovered a large, leather-bound book, covered in dust and mold. Curiosity piqued, we carefully opened the book, revealing page after page of strange symbols and disturbing illustrations. The images depicted twisted, nightmarish creatures, each more horrifying than the last. As we flipped through the pages, we began to hear the whispers again, growing louder and more insistent. It was as if the very air around us was alive, charged with a malevolent energy. That was when we realized our mistake. The gas station was more than just an abandoned relic of the past, it was a prison, holding back the ancient evils that lurked within the pages of that cursed book. We had unwittingly released them, and now they were free to terrorize the world once more. Panic set in, and we raced back up the stairs, desperate to escape the nightmare we had unleashed. We slammed the door behind us and fled from the gas station, but it was too late. The creatures from the book were already stalking us, invisible and relentless. We could hear their footsteps, their rasping breaths, and their sinister laughter as they closed in on us. The air around us was thick with dread, and we knew we were running out of time. We piled back into the station wagon and sped off down the road, but the creatures were relentless in their pursuit. No matter how fast we drove, we could never shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. The forest seemed to close in around us, the darkness deepening with each passing mile. Sleep became impossible, as every time one of us dozed off, we were plagued by nightmarish visions of the horrors we had unleashed. We would awaken in a cold sweat, heart pounding, only to realize that the nightmare was far from over. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, but there was no escape from the torment. We tried to warn others about the gas station, to tell them of the horrors that lay within. But no one would believe us. They dismissed our stories as the ramblings of a group of terrified teenagers, unable to face the reality of what we had done. We were alone in our fight against the ancient evils we had unleashed upon the world. Desperation set in, and we knew we had to find a way to banish the creatures back to the depths from which they had come. We returned to the gas station, armed with everything we could find, salt, iron, and even makeshift weapons. We knew that our chances of survival were slim, but we had to try. We had to protect the world from the darkness that now threatened to consume it. As we entered the gas station, the air crackled with malevolence. The creatures were waiting for us, eager to pick us off one by one. We fought tooth and nail, using every ounce of strength and courage we could muster. The battle raged on for hours, but eventually, we began to gain the upper hand. With a final, desperate effort, we managed to banish the creatures back into the cursed book, sealing it shut with a mixture of blood and salt. The gas station began to crumble around us, as if the very foundations of the building were rejecting the evil that had been unleashed upon it. We escaped just in time, watching from a safe distance as the gas station collapsed in on itself, burying the cursed book beneath a mountain of rubble. Exhausted and battered, we knew that we had won the battle, but at a terrible cost. Our innocence had been shattered, and the scars of our encounter would haunt us for the rest of our lives. And so, I share this story as a warning to anyone who may stumble upon the old gas station in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. If you ever see it, keep driving. The darkness that once dwelled within may be dormant now, but who knows what might awaken it once more. And to my fellow survivors, I know that the nightmares will never truly end. But we faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. We will carry the weight of our actions for the rest of our lives, but we will never forget the bonds that were forged in the heat of battle. Stay strong, my friends. We are the only ones who know the truth of what lies hidden within that cursed gas station. And we are the only ones who can ensure that the darkness remains locked away, forever.